radios weren't the only communication tools used. Sometimes the friends would also insert themselves into normal television programs.
I remember once there was a film, and it was interrupted and their saucers were seen flying, while in the background their voices, maybe only greeting us that time.
A fourth witness of the extraordinary events of friendship who accepted Breccia's invitation to speak is the professor of design Paolo Di Girolamo. His experience was very brief. He met the friendship group only a couple of times. Always a ufology enthusiast, Di Girolamo knew consul Alberto Perego and journalist Bruno Ghibaldi personally, and it was precisely the latter to put him in touch with Bruno Samaciccia in Pescara. Paolo had with him a letter he'd written for the W56.
And he welcomed me into a kind of living room, so to speak. I enter, I lay this letter on the console, and I sit down on the sofa. At one point, Bruno Samaciccia says, "We should be getting some news, let's see." He takes this radio and turns it on. The radio was playing music, and then we hear a piercing whistle. Really a very loud hissing sound. I hear Sigia here. "Hello, Paolo. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all. Be honest with us all." 3 times. Then another voice says, "Let's get the goods." Now, the goods, in my opinion, had to be a big parcel Samaciccia had taken, all lined in black and placed on top of the television set. A very loud crackle, a real blinding purple flash, just like that, and then there was nothing.
After this event, which leaves Paolo speechless, the group goes out into the street. And when they come back inside, Paolo realizes that his letter, which he'd left on the table, was gone. For a moment, they talk about who might have taken it, but nobody understands. Samaciccia's wife also denies touching it. At that point, Bruno urges everyone to go out into the street again.
There wasn't a soul in sight at all. Around midnight, or something like that. At a certain point, I feel something falls on my head. A little piece of paper all folded up. It was a scorched envelope. Open, and it was the letter I'd left on the console.
To make the phenomena possible, or to amplify them, including telepathy, which they made wide use of, the W56 used devices that were called nuclei. They could be placed in objects, in rooms, or even in the bodies of living creatures, including people.
Questi nuclei erano per loro una...
These nuclei were a necessary thing for them. Like if I want to receive a phone call from you, I need to have a phone at my house.
Bruno had a German shepherd named Dick. The friends told Bruno that the dog would play an important role in the contacts and in certain operations that called for the help of the humans. He would become a sort of amplifying antenna. So they asked Samaciccia to bring the dog to the seaside. And at their command, which came by telepathy, Dick was made to go into the water. At that point, the friends would treat the dog, placing nuclei under his paws. In fact, Dick was almost always with Bruno. In one of the film clips that have come to light, we see him looking out of the window while Bruno is filming a UFO circling over the palazzos of Milan, where Bruno lived for a while. It isn't the only ufological document made in Milan. One of the more controversial pieces of information that the W-56 gave to their human friends concerned a conflict with an artificial race called Weros, but which Samachicha renamed with the term CTR, which was the contraction of the word contraries.
One of the strange things about the friendship stories is the existence of enemies, the famous contraries, the CTR. While the W-56 were ethical, these others were materialistic, virtually the opposite of the W-56 in every way. They didn't speak of war, but of conflict, and said one reason they were here was to keep the CTR in check.
The Friends called them science worshippers, saying the CTR were creatures without scruples. And their greatest fear was that we humans were following the same path the CTR had already covered. For the W-56, the feelings of friendship, affection, love and harmony that they were creating between themselves and the human group, just as it is among human beings, were not just defining the quality of relationships.
For them, cohesion, friendship, loyalty, and things like that are not abstract concepts, but rather a living entity that they call Ureda. This living entity is fostered precisely by the sense of loyalty and was contrasted by an alter ego that was called Reda, which was essentially the opposite.
E a loro questa energia serviva come,
And for them,
tra virgolette,
this energy served as a sort of fuel, let's say,
per certi loro
a driving force for some of their means of defense,
o comunque strumenti.
or anyway for their tools.
The defense instruments Gaspare talks about, the Friends explained, were also important for the conflict they had with the CTR. They explained that friendship, which Ureda originated from, was so important that if the group hadn't kept the harmony high, or if the group was even dismembered, they themselves would have fallen victims of the CTR, who might well have destroyed their bases. But this wasn't the only reason to be friends. The W-56 said that love, in its most unselfish sense, as well as ethics, respect, and altruism, should guide every thought and every action. They said these values were essential to ensure a safe and healthy evolutionary progress. A lesson that humanity had to put into practice if it wanted to avoid the risk of terrible self-destruction. The mere thought of doing harm was inconceivable to the W-56, and the sense of ethics, morality, pervaded their every action, their every gesture, their every thought. Even their technology, their machines, were consciously impregnated with it. A concept that for us is unimaginable.
They said they were incapable of causing harm to anyone. They said that even their very devices would refuse to harm anyone. Ethics permeated everything about them, to the point that they would refuse. Indeed, they said that if they weren't able to avoid harming someone, then in that case they would self-destruct.
It wasn't by chance that the journalist Bruno Ghibaldi was with De Lama and Samachicha during the sighting published by Domenica del Corriere. Ghibaldi was extremely involved in friendship and experienced everything there was to be tried, including the personal encounters with the W-56. Stefano Breccia also knew him. He remembers very well how he joined the group.
At the time, Ghibaldi had a program on television about making model aircraft. Giancarlo had seen it by chance, and he liked this person. He asked for Bruno's permission, and Bruno agreed. As a result, Ghibaldi was brought to Milan to meet Bruno, and starting from then also became a part of the circle.
The presence of the journalist was important because he could indirectly publicize a lot of the information that was given by the Friends.
He was a journalist who could help the case by writing about it, while we didn't have any connections like this.
Avevo conoscenze.
He had acquaintances in the field of journalism and television that we didn't have.
The pictures that Ghibaldi took of a UFO over Monte Mario in Rome attracted the attention of Cesare Zavattini. The famous filmmaker interviewed him and put the piece in a documentary film entitled The Mysteries of Rome. The words of Ghibaldi emphasized what the W-56 had said was one of their main tasks on our planet: the control of the nuclear armaments belonging to the superpowers, in the fear that man might make the terrible choice of using them, unleashing a total war. In fact, this is one of the key themes of the entire story of worldwide contactism. Adamski, Siragusa, Menja, and many other contactees received the same kind of message from extraterrestrials. And the W-56 actually intervened with their UFOs and their technology, but with previously trained terrestrial operators, to stop a situation that seemed it might lead to something irreparable. The incident occurred in 1967.
So an operation managed by human beings was launched, which was designed to disable all nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union and in the United States, in the face of a situation that seemed risky, that might degenerate from one minute to the next. There are books written by officers of the US Air Force, by now retired, which tell the story of how their battery of Minuteman missiles had been rendered inactive by flying saucers revolved in the area.
One of the books referred to by engineer Breccia was written by Robert Salas and James Klotz. It contains military documents obtained through the law on the Freedom of Information, the so-called Freedom of Information Act. But there are other clues about the interest these beings had in nuclear weapons. The atomic tests have always been filmed and photographed with special equipment, with technologies that can capture the very first moments of the thermonuclear explosion. In these pictures, we see the explosion in the first few microseconds, when the terrible mushroom cloud hasn't yet formed. In the third snapshot, we note the presence of an Adamskian flying saucer a few meters from the explosion. If authentic, this photo would give us an idea of the incredible technological capabilities of these creatures. Another extremely important person in the history of Italian ufology was Consul Alberto Perego, who wrote as many as 4 books between the 60s and 70s analyzing the world scene and pointing out policy choices made by governments that would have been affected by the overt or covert activities of this sort of alien aviation. Many exceptionally clear photos of UFOs appeared in these volumes. Some of them were even identified as being the inside of a cockpit of a flying saucer. Perego cited the dates and locations of the sightings, but never mentioned the name of the authors of the photos. The places were almost always the classic zones where the W-56 and the Friendship Group were active: Milan, Pescara, Francavilla, Montesilvano. And in fact, the photos were made precisely by the people who were part of Friendship. But we've only learned this today. For Gaspare da Lama, Alberto Perego was of paramount importance. Perego introduced him to the comprehension of the profound implications of the UFO phenomenon and contactism at a time when it was extremely difficult to find material about these issues in Italian.
And then he told me how things were according to him. Naturally, I reeled a bit of the chair because I didn't expect it. He really knew. I mean, he'd understood a lot. He'd understood. A man of great valor, an idealist, a pure man. He, too, was amazing, very cultured.
Perego also announced to Gaspare that he intended to publish a book where he would reveal everything he knew about the presence in our midst of beings from other worlds, a proposal that never materialized, however. Among the correspondence that Gaspare has kept are letters written by Consul Perego himself. In one of these, among other things, he talks about his intention to publish the book I'll Tell All. Other statements made in this excerpt of the letter are also very interesting.
Dear, I imagine you've guessed my bitter experience of recent years. For the revelation of the new reality, I'd bet on two men who have disappeared from the scene, John 23 and Kennedy. As is well known, Kennedy died 5 days before my report went into circulation. As you've seen, everyone keeps quiet or pretends not to know. In 1965, I hope to publish I'll Tell All, but I believe I've already said a good deal. I'm sending you with best wishes, a most affectionate remembrance, Alberto Perego.
But the alleged tasks of these creatures would have been others as well. Another purpose of the presence of the W56 was to help our evolutionary process, to push us to a higher level of understanding. That's why they had been on our planet for a very long time, and even shared with us some of our suffering in the matter. They also revealed that their real name was Acri. Stefano Breccia has done research on this name, discovering some very interesting aspects.
The word Acri is a plural noun in Sanskrit that means the sages. At that point, I tried to see it in Egyptian, and I discovered that there are two very similar words. The first term, Akriu, is the name of these divinities, which usually means the wise people. Then it occurred to me to inquire into other languages. I discovered that in classical Greek, Akri means Akeo, or people in high places. In classical Arabic, Akri means group of friends, or something like that. As a proper noun, the word is fairly common, fairly widespread.
But this wouldn't be the only trace. Years ago, Count Richard Cianfrè gave the Italian contactee Eugenio Siragusa a strange handwritten letter from Voltaire. It was addressed to the legendary Count of Saint-Germain. The text contains enlightening phrases that would fit perfectly into the context of an alleged alien presence in human history.
6th of June, 1761. I am answering your letter of April, Lord, in which the appalling revelations make the old man that I have become the confidant to your most terrible secrets, the day of his death. Thank you, Germain. Your long road through time will be illuminated by my friendship for you. Even at the time of your revelations about the middle of the 20th century. Because of time, the talking pictures will not be able to be stored in memory. May your wonderful flying machines bring you back to me. Farewell, my friend. Voltaire, Gentleman of the King.
What were the talking pictures that Voltaire refers to? And your wonderful flying machines? What had Voltaire seen? Who was the legendary Count of Saint-Germain really? The epilogue of friendship arrived at the end of the 70s because, unfortunately, the people who revolved around Samachicha failed to deliver on the expectations of the cosmic friends. The group gradually and irreversibly fell apart. The Ureda disappeared and the fears of the W56 seemed to come true. This dramatic moment coincided with the phenomena of the Adriatic, the great wave of sightings that occurred between October 78 and January 79.
Officially, the story ended when the CTR managed to get the better. The story is quite difficult to believe from many perspectives. According to me, the adventure of 78 was the surprise ending. I mean, these people were probably fed up with Samachicha and company. and decided to bow out in a spectacular way. In my opinion, it continued to go on, and I have good evidence of this fact in Italy as well as abroad.
Even if the entire story of friendship seems like an incredible science fiction tale rather than an incident that really happened, despite the great controversy about its authenticity, given what has emerged so far, it's difficult to maintain that it had all been an invention.
Believe it, don't believe it. In any case, we can't help but take into consideration the testimonies of the protagonists and the material that refers to these testimonies.
According to eyewitnesses, the sightings, the teleporting, and all the other impressive phenomena that appeared were not, however, the real reason these beings were on Earth. The Friends defined themselves as the precursors of the spirit world. In the end, the real essence, the soul of this relationship, which unfortunately ended up badly because of human shortcomings, is the immense example of love, dedication, and respect that they impressed in the heart of the eyewitnesses still living.
L'insegnamento più bello che ho avuto tra di loro
The most valuable teachings that I received from among them is this momentum they gave us, and this endeavor, perhaps gone amiss, that they've made to love each other truly, to be close-knit, and to be united. They enriched me. They put me into contact with an almost impossible world full of love.
It was also an exciting experience. Very exciting and magnificent. The feeling that the W56 transmitted was one of great friendship and love.
There would be much more to say about friendship. Before leaving, the Friends promised to come back and created a bond with the few remaining humans with an oath of mutual fidelity. Even today, these people believe that there are indeed special friends that could help us or who, in all probability, have never stopped doing so.